Is the frequency in use? Is the frequency in use? Nothing heard. It looks like it's time for the long wire.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. This is the Long Wire, episode number 2. Is this still a thing? So, I guess we're gonna find out. Man. So, I mean, I guess everyone, you probably still know, I'm sure you know who I am. My name's Alan. There's not much new happening here, I guess. We'll do a what's on our bench here in a second. We'll throw it over to Chris here, and he can do his introduction.
Hey everyone. For those who missed the last live stream we did, I'm Chris, ham radio operator. Lived in the same area as Alan, and we're just talking ham radio, and that's what this is all about. So I'm excited to be here and hopefully learn a little bit from Alan and a little bit from myself as well. So yeah, I'll send it back to you, Alan. See what's on your bench.
All right. So yeah, what's on our bench? Oh my goodness, all kinds of stuff. It's kind of been never ending for me, I guess. I tried to do a little bit of cleanup, but that hasn't worked really well. I did complete all the documentation for Operation by Design, so that should be going out in the mail soon. I gotta find some folders for it, but so that was fun. I really enjoyed doing that, putting all that stuff together. So hopefully that works out.
That's awesome. I'm definitely looking forward to that event happening.
Yeah. So I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but we're definitely going to do some sort of either video or, I don't know, maybe I'll try and stream it while we're doing it. I mean, that could be fun too. Depends on the location I pick, I guess, if I'm able to stream it or not. So
yeah, I know my location I will not be able to stream it, but I definitely am going to bring some video cameras and do some video so we can put together a mashup or something like that.
Yeah. I can definitely tell I've picked a really poor position for my camera. It's way up here, and I'm really struggling to look at it right now because it's really an awkward spot. So I'll have to come up with something different than that. So everyone will have to forgive me for not looking at the camera because it's way out of frame for me. So, but I replaced a bent NMO antenna on a vehicle today. So that was fun. I was thinking about making a video out of it, how to replace an NMO mount antenna. I mean, just some of it's pretty simple, but I guess there's probably quite a few people out there that have never actually done anything with an NMO antenna. So they can be kind of intimidating, I think, especially if you're doing a new install. I guess drilling a hole in your vehicle is kind of scary, but
yeah, I do have to say, when I put that NMO mount on my Dakota that I had there for a couple of years, just got a loan, bought a new truck, and what's the first thing you want to do to it? Drill a hole in the roof? What? Yeah, my wife was not too happy about it, but then again, we weren't married at the time, so
right. Yeah. I know. I'm the type of person, I really don't like large antennas. I try to to keep them stealthy. Although I realize now, having said that, I do have that little Tar Heel 2 on my truck, and it's not an inconspicuous antenna. So, but my, the VHF, UHF antennas, they're typically always NMO mount and pretty short and stuff like that. I have found that the length of the antenna, so long as it's resonant for the band you're trying to use, other than that, it really doesn't matter if it's quarter wave or eighth wave or half wave. So I just go for the shortest resonant antenna that'll work, and I go with it. So especially if it's a black stainless steel finish or a black finish, so something that doesn't stand out. But so did we do what was on your bench? I don't remember now.
Oh no, we haven't. So I have kind of not been doing a whole lot of ham radio stuff lately.
It happens.
I've been really focusing a lot on some church stuff. I've joined the church worship band, so
Cool.
just one getting myself familiar with a lot of the sound stuff there, working with a lot of pro audio stuff, kind of immersing myself in that just to help better the team there.
Right.
But I did dig out of my closet the UBitX, the kit that I got. I know, Alan, you got one.
Yeah.
Let me reach out a frame here and grab it just so we can kind of show everyone quick.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I don't think I've showed the one I have to the people, but it's one my wife put together. It was her first kit radio, first radio of any kind, really. So, she's studying to get her ticket, and it was a fun project to do. And of course, when we got it on the air for the first time, we made the first contact with it. It's always kind of magical when you make that first contact with a new kit radio or something you put together yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So here's the kit. It comes in a box, and you kind of assemble it together. On the inside, I believe there's two motherboards in there, ain't there, Alan?
Yeah,
I don't remember. It's been a while. There's one that's got the Arduino based hardware on it, and just really cool. I think you can pick them up for what, $200 now?
Yeah,
somewhere around there. But yeah, I powered off a little 12-volt lithium iron phosphate battery. So I just got it on my desk here. I dug out my old manual tuner, the old MFJ, which I think there's some issues with because I am not even able to tune up anything. It's really bad. So definitely going to be looking into that. My other radios have internal tuners on them, so I've never really had to deal with the manual tuner. I've always had it, but never used it.
Sure.
So, I mean, I could be doing it completely wrong. I really don't know. I just kind of started playing with it. So,
sure.
But yeah, I kind of dug this out. I bought it years ago, but never did anything with it because I ended up getting that Zygu G90. I don't know why, but I always go back to that thing.
The G90 is a nice rig for sure. I know there's a lot of people that kind of scoff at those, but I don't know. I really like it. I really, really like it. So yeah,
I just kind of dug that out. Definitely want to get it on the air. I might end up having to make a dipole and just take it out to the park here and try getting on the air that way and make it resonant so I don't have to worry about tuning it,
Yep. That was a fantastic segue too.
That was. I like that. So, talking about tuning up.
Yeah, talking about tuning and resonance and why does it matter? One of the topics that we're going to talk about tonight is SWR. What is it, and why should you care about it? So, I guess to start with, I'll preface this with I'm an idiot, and I don't know everything there is to know about SWR or VSWR, as it's known in the broadcasting commercial radio business and stuff, is VSWR or SWR. We're effectively measuring the same thing, except it's just two different parameters. There is a lot of, I don't know, there seems to be a lot of perceived black magic around SWR, and everyone seems to think that it's this extremely critical thing, and it's extremely hard to calculate, and it really isn't. And on both fronts. While to a point, it's not critical, but once you get past a certain point, it does start to matter, especially if you want your equipment to live. So what is SWR? SWR stands for standing wave ratio. Conversely, there's VSWR, or voltage standing wave ratio. Like I said, they're both effectively measuring the same phenomenon. It's just we're looking at two different parameters. Effectively, so in a nutshell, here's the calculation to do this. You got to remember it's a ratio. So the calculation is more or less your forward voltage plus your reflected voltage divided by your forward voltage minus your reflected voltage, and that'll give you your ratio of your forward and reflected voltage. I typically will use power or watts, forward power or watts versus reflected power in watts. And it's just like it sounds. Okay, so you have your transmitter, and let's say it's putting out 50 watts of RF power, right? And if you're getting, if you have a mismatch, or you have an SWR problem, you're going to get reflected power, or power that hits the antenna or the feed line or whatever you're using, and is reflected back to the transmitter. And that transmitter has to deal with that, so it dissipates it as extra heat. The extra voltage that it now has to deal with can exceed the ratings of the final output transistors or the protection circuits that are in the radio, and you can cause physical damage to them. And that's more so. You're going to see that more so with HF equipment and what I consider amateur radio grade VHF, UHF gear. And some of you who saw my video on mobiles and portables, I mean, you already know what I mean when I say amateur radio grade. It's not derogatory. It's just how I separate different classifications of equipment. Let's take a bit more of a scientific look at SWR for a second. Let's imagine that you have two wires. Okay, this is going to be our feed line. So you've got two wires that are 1 inch apart from each other. They never touch. They're perfectly straight. And they're the theoretical perfect conductor. It means they have zero loss. There's zero resistance in them. Okay, so these two wires that will never touch will span from the Earth all the way to the sun. Okay, so at the speed of light, it takes 8 minutes for light from the sun to reach Earth. Since electrical impulses flow at the same speed of light, we can use that along with our analogy here. So if you were to take a battery and you connect it to those two wires and you hold it there for 1 second, so you're going to put, let's say, 9 volts into this conductor for 1 second. Okay. Now at the middle of these two wires, you have a voltmeter. So 4 light minutes away from Earth. We're exactly halfway between Earth and the sun. You've got a voltmeter halfway. So it's going to read 0 volts until 4 light minutes have passed. And then you're going to see it's going to jump up to 9 volts. And it's going to stay at 9 volts for 1 second. And then it's going to drop back down to 0 as that pulse passes your voltmeter. And it's going to continue all the way down to the other end. And then so 8 light minutes later, you're going to see another pulse. Now your battery's been off. You only held it on for 1 second, took it off. So there's nothing connected to it. So why are you seeing that second pulse? Well, what happened is that first pulse traveled all the way down that line. It got to the end of it where it's open circuit, and it reflected off of that open circuit. And it comes all the way back. And since this is a perfect conductor, there's 0 loss. It's just going to bounce back and forth between those two open circuits for eternity. So, the next piece of the puzzle is, okay, so what if you short circuit one end of that line? Okay, so you've got an open circuit at the end you're going to connect your battery to, and you've got a short circuit at the other end, 8 light minutes away. So you connect your battery again. It goes from 0 volts to 9 volts for 1 second. If you have your voltmeter at 4 light minutes away, or exactly halfway in between the sun and the Earth, you're going to see that pulse 4 light minutes after you've connected your battery and released it. 4 light minutes later, you see your pulse, positive 9 volts. You see it for 1 second, and then it goes back down to 0. 8 light minutes later, what you're going to see is negative 9 volts. So that 9 volt pulse went to the other end that you've shorted out, and it was reflected 100% back, except now it's 180 degrees out of phase. So so why did that get reflected again? So for the first time it got reflected because it was open circuit. Now it got reflected because it was a short circuit. Okay. So one thing we need to consider is, what are those two conductors? Okay. If you have two conductors with a space in between them, you have a capacitor. A capacitor will have a certain amount of characteristic impedance. So, if you have two conductors that are approximately 1 inch apart, you're going to have about 600 ohms of characteristic impedance. So now, if you took a 600 ohm resistor and you terminated that end that you've shorted, you take your short off, you apply a 600 ohm resistor to that and do the same test again. You hook up your battery for 1 second and then disconnect it. You've got your voltmeter 4 light minutes away in between the two. You'll see your pulse, and then that's it. You won't see anything else. That pulse will reach the end where your 600 ohm resistor is, and as far as that pulse is considered, it doesn't know that it's gone into a resistor. It still sees the same 600 ohms that it saw in the two conductors. So that resistor just radiates it as heat. If we had an antenna, it gets radiated out into space. So obviously I'm not going to get high marks for clarity here, but bear with me. I'm going to make it a lot easier to visualize here. Okay. Imagine your transmitter is a flashlight. Okay. And your transmission line or coax or ladder line or whatever you're using can either be a mirror or can be a window or anywhere in between those two. The same thing with the antenna. The antenna can either be a mirror or a window or somewhere in between. Okay, so the percentage of opaque or reflective that this window or mirror can be is going to be the equivalent of its impedance. Okay, so we're going to link the impedance of the antenna or the coax to how much it is either a window or a mirror. So let's say your transmitter or your flashlight is at 7 megahertz, okay, and it's your transmitter is outputting at 50 ohms. Right? It's expecting a 50 ohm characteristic impedance coax. Okay, now if your coax or your feed line or whatever you're using has the same 50 ohms characteristic impedance, it will appear to that signal as a window, perfectly clear. So all that energy you put into it is going to go straight through it. Now, when it gets to the antenna, if your antenna is resonant at 7 megahertz, it's going to have the same characteristic impedance as the coax and your transmitter, and it also will appear like a window. So all the energy that your transmitter or flashlight put into that system goes straight through the coax and straight out the antenna and gets radiated. Now, let's assume that your transmitter is still a flashlight and your coax is no longer 50 ohms. Let's say you're using 75 ohms, okay? Now, your antenna is still resonant at 7 megahertz, okay? So it's still going to be a 50 ohm load. So when you transmit into this 75 ohm coax, so your transmitter is expecting a 50 ohm load. Now that piece of coax isn't a perfect window anymore. It's got some reflectivity to it. It's somewhere between a window and a mirror. So not all of your power, or your light that you're putting in that system makes it through it. Some of it gets reflected back towards the source. In this case, your transmitter. Okay, so the power that does get through makes it to your antenna and gets radiated. It's the same concept for your antenna. Let's say you have your transmitter, again, it's designed for 50 ohm load, and you're using a 50 ohm coax, but your antenna is not resonant at the frequency you're transmitting on. So now your antenna will be somewhere between a mirror and a window. It's going to be more towards the mirror side of things. So the energy that your transmitter just put in the coax now flows freely through that coax, hits that antenna, And since it's not resonant, some of that power gets reflected back, just like a mirror. And now that extra power comes back towards your transmitter. Now your transmitter has to deal with extra power coming back to it. So that's kind of, at least for me, an easier way to conceptualize what's happening. I know in the strictest of senses, as far as physics goes, that's not how it works, but it's an easy way to visualize what happens and the same kind of consequences. It's easy to tell, at least for me, it's easy to visualize that, yeah, it makes sense. My antenna is not resonant for the frequency I'm trying to use it at. That power I'm putting into it's just going to get reflected. Whereas if it is resonant, all that power I'm putting into it gets radiated. So for me, it's an easy way to look at this. How important is this really? You hear a lot of people say that, well, if you don't have a perfect 1.0 to 1, you're burning up a lot of your power in heat. And yes, okay, so the what you're always going to be shooting for is 1.0 to 1. Okay, so that's going to be 0% loss or 100% efficiency. So every watt of power that you put into your system gets radiated as RF power out of the antenna. Nothing gets reflected back to your transmitter. Okay, and so that's ideal, perfect conditions. All right. Since we live in reality, that's almost never going to happen perfectly. You're always going to have some loss in the system. Okay, so what happens if we go to 1.1 to 1? Okay, just a little bit of reflectivity has been added. What happens then? Okay, so now we're going to get about 0.2% loss. So you're only getting 99.8% of the power you put into your system gets radiated as RF. Okay, so you can see a little bit of a increase in reflected or lost energy there. So let's step it all the way up to 1.5 to 1. Okay, so now you're going to get about 4% loss. 96.0% of the power that you put into that is going to get radiated. The rest of that gets reflected back at your transmitter. Excuse me. 1.5 to 1 SWR to me is a good safe spot to keep it to. That's sort of like the high end of where you want to be. Ideally, you want to be lower than that, but realistically, if you're 1.5 to 1 or less, nobody cares, okay? So you're going to be just fine if you're below that. Like I said, there's a lot more physics involved with this, there's a lot more technicality to it than this. There's plenty of videos on YouTube that go a lot further in depth, okay, than I have. There's some visual demonstrations that I wish I could do here, and maybe I could do a whole video, I guess, dedicated to that, because that would be kind of fun to do that. But I guess another way we could look at this too is, if you're in a pool and you make a big wave and the wave bounces off the far side of the pool, comes back at you, it's the same kind of concept. You're sending a wave down your coax and out your antenna, and if there's any mismatch in your impedance, you're going to get some energy that gets reflected. So we want to keep everything at the same characteristic impedance. We want to keep our antennas resonant as much as possible to the frequency that we're using on. Ideally, we wouldn't even want to use a feed line, because you're going to introduce some losses just in that. And to those people who are using like an end-fed antenna, that's effectively what you're doing. You're feeding the antenna directly off the back of your transmitter. So you kind of eliminate a feed line issue there, but then you also introduce other issues like getting RF back in your shack and stuff like that, and all sorts of fun stuff. I think I got a couple minutes left. Let's. I'm going to switch you over to this other screen here. We're going to look at a a watt meter, and I'll kind of explain a little bit what you're looking at and how to read one of these. So let's go ahead and switch over to this. All right. So what we have here is probably one of the more basic watt meters that you're going to see. It's what they call a cross needle watt meter, which can calculate your SWR for you. Okay. Now you see you've got on the left side it says forward, on the right side it says reflected. Okay, so your forward power, that's your power coming from your transmitter going towards your antenna. The reflected power is the power that has hit your antenna or your coax or whatever and been reflected back. Now, placement of this watt meter is pretty key. You want it as close to your transmitter as possible because you want to also measure your feed line. Okay, if you put it at just right at your antenna, you're only going to measure your antenna, not your feed line. Okay, so we really only care what the transmitter is seeing. Okay, so we want to measure the whole system. So like I said, your forward power is the power that's being transmitted out of your transmitter going towards your antenna. Reflected is any power that is being reflected from the antenna back to the transmitter. Okay, so on this particular gauge here, or indicator, you've got your forward power, which goes from 0 to 300 watts. Your reflected power goes from 0 to 60 watts. Okay, so that has to do with how this particular meter is calibrated, because since it's a cross needle setup, you're going to measure your SWR value at the point where these two needles cross. Okay, so let's imagine that we're putting out 50 watts. Okay, so your forward power should go all the way up to about 50. Okay, but if you're dealing with some SWR issues or antenna issues or whatever, it won't quite get to 50. Your transmitter is going to be putting out 50 watts, but not all 50 watts are going to be running in the forward direction. Some of it's going to be reflected back, and you will see that on the right-hand needle, on your reflected scale. So let's say that you're getting 5 watts back on reflected. So at the point where those two needles cross, you're gonna see we're going to be about 1.3 to 1 SWR, which is perfectly acceptable. So on a 50 watt output, like getting 5 watts back, while not, not great, it's not bad. Okay, you're not going to burn anything up at that point. I would still probably look into why you're getting that much reflected, but you're not going to hurt anything at that point, depending on what kind of equipment you're using. So that is kind of the basics on how you would read one of these meters. Like I said, on the left side, you've got your forward power that's coming from your transmitter going to your antenna. The right-hand side is reflected, so that's any power that gets reflected from the antenna back towards your transmitter. And the point at which these two needles cross is where the SWR is. So you kind of have to estimate where that cross point is. If it's in between 2.5 or 2, you can kind of do a bit of estimation there. There's far more accurate gauges, more accurate instruments out there to do that with. But that meter will certainly get you close enough. So I would have no qualms at all using one of those in my system. So, but like I said, I know I don't have the highest marks for clarification on that, I guess, but maybe I can do a more in-depth video on that where I can kind of take some time and go into it a little bit deeper. But hopefully that's shed some light on this for some people. Like I said, I wouldn't get too wrapped up in SWR. I wouldn't be scared of it, I guess. I would caution that you should definitely be measuring it, especially on a new system that you've installed. If you've just done some antenna work or just put up a new antenna, if you've just put in new coax or anything like that, you definitely want to measure your SWR. And most modern HF rigs are going to have an SWR meter built into them. I would caution, though, starting off at a very low power, 5 to 10 watts, to see what your SWR does. And if you get a high reading, you can do your troubleshooting from there. And most modern equipment will have protection circuits built into it. So if it does encounter a high SWR, it's going to roll its own power back. So, it's going to do its best not to hurt itself. So you've probably got some safety margin there, although me personally, I don't like relying on that. I like having a good matched system. So so that's kind of the lowdown on SWR, I guess. You're as always, you can leave comments with questions and things like that. And like I said, I'll probably do another video on this a little later.
So I
Yeah,
I do got to say the way that you explained it with the window and the mirror, that really like put it together for me. It was really, I never really did understand SWR. All I knew is, hey, keep your SWR at least below 2-to-1.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. Yeah, 2-to-1, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I always told too, was 2-to-1, but because that let's see here. I put together a little graph thing, but so at 2-to-1, yeah, let's see, 2-to-1, you're losing 11%. You're losing 11% of your output power to reflected.
Okay.
So
yeah, so with a G90, 20 watts out, you're losing 11%, so call it 2 watts. So really you're getting 18 watts out.
Right.
Which if you're using a QRP rig, that's a lot.
Right. Yeah.
If you're using 1.5 gallons, okay, you can probably eat some of that, but
yeah, that's a really good point. I hadn't even considered that. Yeah, if you're running a QRP station and it only puts out 5 watts, if you're getting 1.5 watts of reflected power, that's a real big deal. So.
Yeah, definitely. That 1.5 watts back is definitely not going to hurt your rig. I guarantee that. But it's definitely not going to make the contacts that you want to make.
You're not going to make the contacts you want to make. You're burning up a lot of unnecessary battery power. Presumably, if you're running QRP, you're on battery.
Yeah.
So you're expending all your battery energy to generate that RF, only to have most of it get reflected.
Yeah. I did like that explanation. Thanks, Alan.
Yeah. All right.
So I guess I can lead into my little section that I wanted to talk about. I'm also going to preface this with I am not a very smart person. I am a person that knows how to use Google, though.
Right.
And I will not say I know how to use it good either. But I do know how to use Google, and I kind of have Googled my way around this topic here the last couple days. It is very deep. You can get so far deep into this that you'll never come out of it. But I want to talk about what in the world is a sunspot? What is an SFI, solar flux index? What does this mean? So if you've ever been on QRZ, right here, right in the middle of the screen, you see this black box with a whole bunch of data. What does it mean? To me, when I first got my ham radio license and I signed up for QRZ, I looked at it and I clicked on, where is it? My logbook, wherever it is. Database. I clicked on database or wherever it is, and I just stayed there. I never wanted to look at that solar data because it hurt my head to look at. The more and more I learn about it, it helps. Do I rely on it? Never. I actually never look at this before I start operating. I look at it when I don't operate, just out of curiosity. So let me pull up another screen here. So in amateur radio, you hear a lot of the solar cycle. This is a map or a chart of the solar cycles going back to whatever 1750, year 1750, right? So astronomers have always been interested in the sun, and they started recording the number of sunspots that they see. And a sunspot is literally just a dark spot on the surface of the earth or surface of the sun.
Nice.
Back then, they probably had no idea what that meant, but they recorded it. Now we can take that data and make cool little charts, and you notice the the cycle up and down, up and down, up and down for 25 cycles. We're in the 25th cycle. So if I zoom in here a little bit, I'm going to back out. We're still tracking this data. The NOAA is tracking it. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So with this, let me pull up my notes here. So yeah, I guess a sunspot, basically what we've learned is that it is an area of high magnetic activity on the surface of the sun that produces a cool area on the surface. So the spots are actually a cool area of the sun per se. Still probably thousands and thousands and thousands of degrees in these cool areas, but relatively cooler than the other parts of the sun. In these areas, the sun is actually emitting more UV radiation around the outside of these sunspot areas. And that is what us as amateur radio operators are interested in. This UV radiation, when it comes to Earth and hits the ionosphere, it energizes our ionosphere. The more energy that's in the ionosphere, the easier it is, I guess you could say, it is for the higher frequencies to bend and, I guess, bounce back to Earth as you're on HF. So typically 20 meters and below, 20, 40, 80, that typically you don't have any issues with skip. But as soon as you get up 17, 15, 12, 10, it's really hard to communicate with others, especially at a low in this solar cycle, because there's not as much energy in the ionosphere for that RF energy to bend back down towards Earth. So we really do like a high sunspot number. It obviously helps with being able to use 10 meters, even 6 meters. So that's kind of what that is. So one thing that happened. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So if I'm looking at this graph right, we're well on our way back to like a solar maxima. Then I guess is what you would call it, maybe.
Yeah. So going back here, let's go back. Let's open this graph up a little bit. So back in the 40s to 50s, you can see the solar maximum. We had a maximum of just shy of 300 sunspots, and that's an average for the month, right?
Okay.
This is obviously going to change on a day-to-day basis. So they kind of round it out over a month period and then chart this. So each year it's different. The sun doesn't do the same thing every 10 years, I guess I should say, not each year. So last year, or the last solar cycle 24, you can see was really, really low.
Yeah.
Even going back, we were probably the lowest since the 1800s.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of people were concerned with that. Is the sun dying? Or should we be worried about our sun, right? Because this is basically a way of seeing, what is our sun doing? Is it putting out enough energy? Is it not? I guess, like I said, I'm not a scientist. I don't know what that meant with it being a low year. But the one thing to note is the red line here is just kind of a projection based off of the previous cycles, right?
Okay.
And this year, so far, we've been higher than their projection every single month.
Oh, that's cool.
For this past solar cycle. So the past 3 years, we've been high. That could mean a couple different things. It could mean that we're going to have a great year like we did back here in like 1956, 1957, where it keeps going up and up and up. Or could the sun start slowing down today and have a really low year, just like solar cycle 24? We don't know. I don't know. I know for sure I don't know. um, I don't think the scientists know. They just collect data and chart it, and they can use all their cool algorithms to plot it out. But in the end, yeah, that don't mean anything.
Right.
But yeah, so that's kind of what a solar or a sunspot is.
Okay.
Uh,
I just
So-
I just forwarded you a picture. Scott just sent it to me. I'm assuming it's a picture he took.
okay, let me
Or maybe not.
Let
He
me
did,
save
he did
this.
say Google search, I guess, on there. But it's still a fascinating picture of what a sunspot actually looks like. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, let me pull that up. Okay, can you see that, Alan?
Yeah.
Okay, so here, this is obviously the side of the sun facing the Earth, but you can see these dark spots all over. So this would be like a big patch of them, and in there, that's a lot of UV energy coming off of that towards Earth. So when these spots face Earth directly, so if that big chunk was dead in the center facing Earth, you could predict that we are going to have really good HF communications on the higher bands, 12, 10, and whatnot. At least I think that's how it works.
Okay.
I could be completely wrong, but that's what my Googling skills have learned me.
Well, we definitely reserve the right to be wrong and everything. And Scott did confirm that was one of his pictures. So
Oh, okay, that's cool. So
really cool.
yeah, thanks Scott for that picture. That's awesome. I know getting into photography like that is not cheap. Making sure you got the right filters. Definitely do not take your smartphone out and try taking a picture of the sun. That will not work. You will have a bad day. But if you are interested in taking some cool pictures like that, I'm sure there is a lot of information out on the web, YouTube. But yeah, so that's sunspots in a nutshell. Bad things with sunspot groups. So I guess you could call that a group on that last picture. Is you tend to see a lot of CMEs, coronal mass ejections. Basically, that magnetic field erupts from the sun and just shoots plasma and energy directly at the Earth.
okay, that's the scary stuff that kills all our electronics and stuff when it hits the Earth, isn't it?
Yes. So you might have heard about the Carrington event. I believe it's the Carrington event, a big CME. I don't even remember what year it was. Probably back in the 50s and 60s.
Oh, yeah, yep,
That sound about right?
yeah.
Where there was a huge solar storm, and if I remember correctly, I've heard stories of you could see the electrostatic discharge like on the power lines and all this craziness. I don't think they had a way of measuring it back then like we do now, but it definitely fried a lot of stuff. And they obviously didn't have any type of protection circuits back in the day.
Oh, wow.
Everything was analog back then.
I just Googled it. So the first that came up was its Wikipedia page, naturally. And it says
Oh yeah,
the
they messed that all up.
okay, so it says the Carrington event was the most intense geomagnetic storm in recorded history, peaking from 1 to 2 September 1859 during solar cycle 10. It created strong auroral displays and were reported globally, caused sparking and even fires in multiple telegraph stations. The geomagnetic storm was most likely the result of a coronal mass ejection, or CME, from the sun colliding with Earth's magnetosphere. Wow.
Okay, so I'm gonna zoom in here on solar cycle 10 back in 1850s. Honestly, that was a year just about like last year, a peak of about not last year, sorry, last solar cycle, a peak of about 200 sunspots.
Wow.
So that's kind of crazy. I guess it was a little bit higher, but
it goes on to say, and this is Wikipedia, right? So you kind of got to take it with a grain of salt, but this is a geomagnetic storm of this magnitude occurring today would cause widespread electrical disruptions, blackouts, and damage due to extended outages of the electrical power grid. Huh.
So yeah, that's just a little bit about that. Yeah, the cycle of the sun is just kind of crazy. What else did I have here in my notes? A lot of people talk about the K index, KP index.
Well, okay.
I'm sure you've seen that if you are interested at all about aurora chasing, going out and photographing the northern lights. This is one of the things that they kind of talk about as K factor. Basically, it's an indicator of the disturbance in the Earth's magnetic field, right?
Yeah.
So when we get hit with this high amounts of energy, it's obviously messing up our magnetic field. And we have ways of measuring it. So that's just one thing that is on the QRZ website, if I can jump back to that here. So you can kind of see here, you got your SN is your sunspot number, your K index. Right now we're at a 4. According to my notes, we've got an active magnetic field. So there's obviously a lot of activity right now with all these sunspots and just hitting Earth's atmosphere with a lot of high energy radiation. I've seen it up to 6 and 7. They consider that a major and severe geomagnetic storm. I would probably say the Carrington event is probably like a K8, just based off of what I've a little bit I've heard about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, then they also have a index, which is a logarithmic scale. The K factor is just like a linear scale, 0 to 9, 0 being the atmosphere or the geomagnetic field is very inactive and quiet, normal per se, and 9 is extremely severely active. The A scale, it's logarithmic. 0 to 7 is quiet. 8 to 15 is unsettled. And then the high end severe storms are 1 to 400. So right now we're at a 21, which is active. So just different ways of measuring the geomagnetic field.
That's cool.
Yeah, so kind of a little cheat sheet here. The A index, low is good. Low is good on that. That means the magnetic field is stable, I guess you could call it. Same thing with the K index. A and K are kind of related. I don't know how they calculate the two or what the difference is between them, but it all has to do with the sunspot numbers and all that stuff. SFI, you want high for HF communications. So anything over 100, they say is like best conditions. Right now we're at a 175, like,
oh, wow.
Amazing. So I don't know if you've been on 10 meters lately at all, Alan, have you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've been on 10 meters on 20 watts and I've talked into Ireland, Italy, all over Europe on 20 watts with a 5.9 signal.
It's crazy because it wasn't that long ago I was tuning into these same frequencies and hearing absolutely nothing.
And, 100%. I mean, a year ago.
Yeah.
A year ago today, it would have been dead quiet on 10 meters.
Yeah, and now there's literally the world out there. It's absolutely that's definitely why they call it the magic band, I guess.
Yeah. So sorry, we're coming up here on 10 o'clock already. I just noticed that.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, on QRZ website, they kind of break it down really simple for you. Let me go back to that one more time. So in the bottom right-hand corner here, that didn't work. So they show you the bands 80 to 40 meters right now during the day, pretty poor. Not great across all of it, honestly. As of right now, I do believe there was just a CME that happened yesterday, if I remember right. So there's a lot of disturbance, I guess you could call it.
Sure.
Um, Probably a couple weeks ago, I looked down here and daytime 10 meters, 12 to 10 and 17 to 15 were green and it said good. And you jump on 10 meters at that time and literally you just tune around, you just hear people from all over the world. So if you're interested, check out QRZ. If you don't know anything about it, all you got to do is look at this little bottom left-hand corner. It shows you, hey, is it going to be a bad day, or do you think I can, make some contacts?
And that's.
I will say, oh, go ahead, Alan.
No, I was just going to say that that's great news for technician class license holders.
Oh, for sure. If you are a tech holder, you do have privileges on 10 meters, 28, 300 to 500, I believe.
Yeah.
If you come on here and even right now, fair, you can probably get on, well, obviously not right now because it's nighttime, but say tomorrow morning you wake up, 9 o'clock, make some coffee, fire up your HF rig. I guarantee you can get on and make some contacts.
Oh, for sure.
Especially in that technician class range. Super awesome. Most of my 10-meter contacts, even as a general, have been in that technician range just because I do want to make contact with techs if they are out there. I don't want to, as a general, move away from that area and discourage someone that's in that area trying to make a contact.
Right. Yep.
So
I know I've been trying to get back into the 10 meters. I got so used to, we were in that solar minimum. I got so used to 10 meters just being non-existent, so I'm trying to get back in the habit of getting on 10 meters and talking to some techs.
Yeah, I believe I don't have my G90 hooked up right now, but most of the time when I power that puppy on, it's sitting at 28,300 because that's where I was last.
Nice.
I don't even go down to 20 meters anymore. Well, obviously you can see right here, 20 meters is poor during the day right now. Just because we have that much energy in the ionosphere to be able to use these other bands. So
I don't know. Can you? I suppose you can't see the chat from your end, but there's a question that says if we've noticed a difference. I can say personally, 100%. I've noticed a difference. Like this time last year, you would get on 10 meters and there would be absolutely nothing there. It would be just static. I mean, literally just static across almost the entire band.
Oh, 100%.
And now you get on and there's barely even an empty space out there. I mean, it's just full of signals.
Yep. I definitely have to agree with you, Alan, there. A year ago, I wouldn't get on anything above 20 meters.
Yep.
I would strictly stay on 20 meters just because that's what worked.
Yep.
And I mean, 17 was hit or miss depending on, I guess, whether there was contests or not. If there was contests out there, 17 was full because most contesters don't use 17 meters. And they kind of reserve that for people who don't want to contest during that time anyway.
Right.
But yeah, 10 meters a year ago was nothing. Crickets. So yeah, it being a ham that was not active. I mean, I wasn't even a ham in the last solar cycle. So I came in as a ham in 2016, and that was literally on the downfall, almost the bottom of solar cycle 24.
Yeah, I think I came in at about the same time. I think we were only a couple months apart, weren't we? We got in.
I believe so. Yep.
But yeah,
so yeah, 2016 was. I mean, they only had 20 sunspots for part of that year. Like just super bad.
Yeah, I mean, I remember. I mean, my whole first year was pretty much just 20 and 40 meters. You know, it wasn't
Yeah,
until
and I was never a fan of 40 meters. I don't know. I didn't like it. It was noisy for me.
yeah,
And that could have just been where I was. I've always lived in an apartment,
yeah.
except for the couple of years we owned our house there.
I got
Um,
so used to staying on 40 and 80 meters at night, and then occasionally going to 20 meters during the day. But the problem with 20 meters is unless it's a weekday, it's going to be full of contesters usually.
right. Yeah.
So and
20 meters on the weekend. I mean, just about every weekend all year long, there's some type of contest.
yeah, nowadays,
So,
if it's not contest, it's like parks on the air or something like that. Nothing against the parks on the air guys. That's pretty cool what they do, but you get so many of them on the air.
yeah.
It kind of
Yeah.
it kind of plugs things up for those who wanna do the rag chewing, I guess. So
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I do parks on the air. Yeah, I get on 20 meters. Sorry,
well,
Alan.
well, no,
but
I do the same thing.
I also do enjoy sitting there having the longer conversation with the guys that I do make contact with.
I do the same thing. I've done the parks on the air. I've activated like Bridgewater Park and Riverside Park. I did it mobile though. I just drove down with my truck because it's wintertime and it's like it's minus 20 freedom outside. So I'm not gonna
Right.
I'm not gonna set up portable unless I absolutely have to. So I'll sit in the truck and whatever. But I kind of operate at a bit slower pace. I still have a bit of a conversation with the guy, but
Yeah.
so
Yeah, if someone wants to sit there and have a conversation with me on 20 meters as I'm doing parks on the air, more power to them. The guys that are waiting in line to make contact with me, sorry, you can wait.
right, yeah,
Quite frankly.
the yeah, I know. I sometimes I get frustrated with other operators, like if they're running a pileup because they let the pileup overwhelm them. When I'm doing something like that, it's like that the pileup queue proceeds exactly as fast as I say it moves. So if I want to have a 15-minute conversation with the guy I'm talking to, that's what I'm going to do. So everybody else can wait.
Yep. I know there was one time I was out at Standing Bear Lake here, activating that park, and I don't know what it was, but I called CQ POTA for like 30 seconds, and within I made the first contact, called CQ again, made the second contact, and literally I had a pile up a mile long,
Yep.
and I made like 60 contacts in 45 minutes.
Yep.
And it went by so fast, I didn't even enjoy it, honestly. I was just flying through it, and I wish I would have slowed down a lot.
Yeah.
Looking back at it, but hindsight's 2020. I had fun doing it. It was kind of cool knowing that, hey, I can work a pile up if I have to.
Yep. Yeah.
Not that I ever really want to do it again, but
yeah.
it was fun.
Oh yeah, I definitely have a blast doing it too. Although I try not to spend more than 25, 30 minutes at the park doing it, because I mean, in today's society, let's face it, a guy sitting alone in his truck at a park for 30 minutes, just sitting there, it can make people nervous. So
yeah, especially someone that's got a bunch of wires and antennas hanging off their truck.
Right,
that just
exactly.
look kind of sketchy.
It's just it's just the optics of it, to people who don't know what's going on. So you just kind of got to be cognizant of that, especially if you're in a park that's in a residential area.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, in Omaha here, literally every park is in town, surrounded by people. These parks are always busy. There's always kids running around. So putting up a dipole out in a park like this isn't very easy to do.
Right.
So yeah, if I did that, people would probably like avoid it and not be sketched out, because they would probably understand, hey, this guy's doing something.
Right. And that's just it.
Instead of sitting in his truck looking like a creeper.
Exactly. Yep. That's exactly it. So, I mean, fortunately, I live in a rural area, so I've got plenty of spots elsewhere that I can go, but the other problem is it's wintertime up here. It's wintertime 22 months out of the year up here. So finding a spot to park can be difficult sometimes because of the snow, but it is what it is.
Sorry, I'm trying not to laugh. 22 months out of the year.
They say you get used to it up here. I don't know. I came, I don't remember. Yeah, you might have noticed it, but I'm originally from North Carolina, so
right.
I don't know. I can honestly say you don't actually ever really get used to it. You learn to tolerate it and deal with it, but you definitely don't get used to it. So,
Yeah, I did 6 years up there. And at the end of year 6, the year that my daughter was born, and it was -20 all winter long, and you couldn't do anything. And it was like 9 months
yeah.
just of cold and bitter and snow on the ground. And I got sick of it, and I'm like, nope, all right, we're packing up and we're dipping out of here.
Oh man.
But
no, I remember when we first moved up here, my grandparents had already moved up here. My grandfather was originally from here. He was from the Max Bass area in North Dakota, kind of like the north central North Dakota. I mean, it's a really small town, but he's like, yeah, the winters aren't that bad up here. You get used to it and whatever else. We moved up here in 96. So the winter of 96, 97 was, I think, safe to say, epic for even up here, I guess. So, I mean, as a kid, I remember the first time, going out and we still went outside for recess at school. It was minus 41 degrees outside.
Oh yeah, just make sure you got your hat and mittens on. You're good.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I could go on forever about this. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
yeah,
I think we got a little bit off topic there.
Yeah,
but
no
that's
kidding.
all right. That was a little bit of fun reminiscing.
Yeah.
So,
So yeah, now is a great time for the new ham to get into this, being on our way up to a solar maxima. With 10 meters being the way it is, and I know this is going to get controversial, but 11 meters being the way it is. So, I mean, 11 meters thrives off a skip. You switch over to 11 meters, and it's just, it's a different group of people, we'll say. So you're going to hear some things on 11 meters that probably isn't G-rated, we'll say, but,
Yeah, we will definitely not be live streaming audio coming from 11 meters.
Yeah. And it's kind of sad that, just the other night I had gone for a little bit of a drive, and I was listening to the bottom end of 40 meters mobile. And I mean, honestly, it sounded like, the old Charlie Bravo. I mean, it was so there was two guys. I know we're getting a bit off topic and we're coming up over an hour now, but there were two guys that were just trying to have a normal conversation, and there was 4 other guys that were just walking all over him, making fun of him and calling him names and making all sorts of dumb sounds into the microphone. And it was just, I don't know, it's really disheartening to hear that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, these days, you're going to run into that now. So
yeah, and I'm sure that's always been there, back years past.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, it's unfortunate. You run into it. It is what it is. So he just ended up just kind of spin the dial. So what do you do?
That's why God invented the VFO, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So especially now with the coming up to a solar max, and we got more room.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So, and plus now that we got the 2200 meter band, and I forget what the other one is.
Oh, what is the other one? 660?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, yeah, the 2200 meter band. I thought to myself, my God, that'd be a lot of fun to play. I've got a little bit of real estate. I could probably build an antenna. And I was doing the math on it. It's like if I had the wire element, so I've got probably 250 feet of yard to work with. I would still need a loading coil that would be the size of 2 55-gallon drums to make this.
I was going to say, you're just going to have to wrap a bunch of, make a coil out of your shed.
Yeah. It's just unbelievable how huge that loading coil would have to be. And plus, I think you're still limited to 1 watt. So
Yes, usually limited to 1 watt.
yeah, and then I don't remember if that's still in effect. Where if you're going to operate on those bands, I think you're supposed to inform the FCC. You're supposed to write them a letter, and if you don't hear anything back, then you're good to go, or something weird like that. So I remember when those bands were first announced, they had said that you were supposed to do something like that. But
Okay, that was back in 2017. Does that sound right?
yeah, it sounds about right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've never looked into that because I mean, getting on 20 meters is hard enough for me. So
Yeah, that's right. I keep forgetting you're in an apartment. I think you're.
yeah,
Are you
yeah,
still running the Slinky antenna?
I am. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, honestly, I love it. It's multi-band. It's got a 9-to-1 balun in it,
Yeah.
so it brings just about every band. So from 20 up, so 20 to 10. I think they're all below 3-to-1
Nice.
without a tuner. So the
Yeah.
G90 tunes everything up.
I think I may have to build something like that for Operation by Design. I guess my plan B is always just going to be to do it mobile, but to me that still seems like a bit of a cop out. You know,
Yeah.
I want to set up portable, do it the right way,
Yeah.
DIY an antenna.
Yeah, I actually, you're never gonna believe this. That Slinky antenna,
Yeah.
I actually did tune up on 80 meters.
What?
1.2-to-1. Not even joking.
Oh, that's awesome.
Granted, 20 watts on 80 meters at 10 o'clock at night ain't gonna get you very far when everyone's running, you know, a gallon.
Yeah.
So
Everyone else out there is running 500,000 watts on AM, and
yeah, yeah. So I probably won't ever be able to talk to anyone on it. Me and you may have to try it one night.
Yeah.
Just for
we could probably do
fun.
we might be able to do. Let's see. We might be able to do ground wave. I would think maybe at that distance.
I guess I don't know.
I guess yeah. I'm not sure either. That might be a bit far for ground wave. I'm thinking maybe.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to do some looking into it. That would be fun to get on 80 meters though, if we could make it work on our little G90s.
Yes, for sure.
The hardest part's going to be finding space
Yeah.
on the band because I know every time I pull up 80 meters at 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, I mean the band is packed.
Yeah.
So
Yep. Yeah.
which is good. It's good for the hobby. I'm glad everyone, all the frequencies are being used.
Right. Yeah, and it's
So-
like 99% of the people you run into are amazing people, and they're more than happy to chat with you, even if they're already in the middle of a conversation. If you kind of wait for the right moment, and you hear
Yeah.
a bit of a lull, and you key up and say contact, and they let you in, and so
Yep.
there's still quite a few good people out there to have some really interesting conversations with, and whatever else. So I know I did
Yeah.
hear that the Super Bowl, when that was on, there was a group of people who were watching the game and then also on HF discussing the game while they were watching it. It was pretty neat to listen to.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. That would have been cool.
Yeah, they all had their rigs set up on Vox, and so that was
Oh, that's pretty sweet.
yeah.
So,
But-
all right. Well, we are definitely over our 10 o'clock.
Yeah, we're
But,
definitely over an hour, so which is fine because I think we had what did I see? A grand total of 4. I think 4. We were up to 4 viewers.
Oh, 4 viewers. Yes. We're making it big.
Yeah. Yeah. But I don't know. We'll get there eventually. But
Yeah, I mean, I was probably one of those viewers, so
yeah.
really only 3. And then you got Scott, so he was 2. Tamara was 1.
Yeah. I'm guessing maybe Matt, so he might have been the other one.
Hey, well,
So-
we're all here. That's all
Right.
that matters.
That's all right. We'll get there.
So,
It's probably good that no one was watching anyway, because I mean, my segment was an absolute disaster. I feel like, but
it's all right. Mine was not any better. So,
anyway,
but
we'll get better.
yeah, definitely. So,
Anyway, I guess on that note, for the people who were watching, we appreciate everyone who was watching. Like I said, we're gonna try to do the live stream, at least this. We're gonna try to do a long way at least once a month for now. We'll see how it goes. I'm always adding content at least once weekly in some form or another. So like I said, we're mainly in this for the subs and likes, so I don't plan on trying to go out of my way to make things super consistent, but we're still gonna have fun with it. We're still gonna make it fun and educational and all sorts of fun stuff. So anyway, with that, my name is Alan, and we'll let Chris do his sign off.
Oh, I didn't know I had to have a sign off.
Oh.
Sorry. Well, let's see. From Omaha, this is Chris. Have a good night.
Nice. I love the radio voice. All right. Perfect. It's good seeing you again, Chris.
All right. You too, Alan. Thanks.
Right.
It's always good.
Yeah. We'll see you. This is Alan. Out.
We now return the frequency back to normal amateur operations. We thank you for your patience and your understanding.